Today I'm going to give a tour of my model warship, which was built for combat under the rules of the IRCWCC, a hobby that we build these ships to fight each other. These ships all actually existed between 1906 and 1946. This is the Italian heavy cruiser Zara. In our hobby, the ships are divided into classes, which roughly scale to the size and relative power of the ships that existed in real life. This, along with a lot of other heavy cruisers, is 3 units. Some of the smaller cruisers are 2.5 or 2 units and smaller. Battle cruisers are often 4 units. Some battleships are 4 units. Mid-sized battleships are generally going to be 5 units, and the large battle cruisers are 5 units. More modern battleships are going to be 6. The Vanguard is 7, and then the Iowa and Yamato are class 8. And so each of those units can be either a gun or a pump, and it's the captain's choice to decide how to allocate those units. Typically, this is, in this type of ship, allocated to 2 stern guns and a pump. There are restrictions to where guns can go on ships. It depends sort of on the size and really the class of the ship. So most class 3 ships, like cruisers, were thought to be too narrow and too tippy and rolly from side to side, that it would be actually dangerous to put guns off the side of them because it might tip over a lot easier than a battleship and shoot spectators and people on the shore. So for that reason, the smaller boats are only allowed to have guns directly off the bow or the stern, like in this ship, within 15 degrees. So you could angle these a little bit, but it really wouldn't allow you to get a lot of functional advantage, because it really wouldn't be able to kind of go depress the gun much. You could potentially do that off the bow, but that gets to be a little bit of a tricky scenario. Bow guns in general are a little trickier to use. They're a lot more dangerous because you have to put your most maneuverable kind of getaway part of your ship directly at an enemy, and you can get trapped and caught and shot up that way. So a lot of situations, especially for smaller cruisers and such, bow guns are not what I would consider a standard or a good baseline sort of gun to choose. The Zara is a heavy cruiser which was completed in the early 1930s. This particular ship, which I built, was built out of wood from the plans. You can take the hull lines and the plan views and turn it into a model. One of the reasons I chose to build this ship is because it is somewhat unique. There are not that many of them that I've seen out there. One of the reasons is that there are no available fiberglass prefabricated hulls. A lot of ships can be purchased as a prefabricated fiberglass hull, in which then you simply add the deck and cut out 85% of the side in order to be penetrable within the rules. This particular ship is nice because it has some of the features that are just generally good for cruisers. One of the features is that it is a step deck, meaning the hull is higher in the bow, and then it steps down and it's lower in the stern. This is useful because it gets the stern guns lower to the water. You want your stern guns to hit right, essentially a few feet behind the ship out here. It's relatively easy to aim those. You can easily get away by driving forward if you should be challenged, and you don't have to usually risk your ship all that much to get quality shots off. They're good ships for beginners and for experienced captains that don't want to haul around a really heavy ship. Generally, cruisers are going to be a lot lighter. They're also good for travel. They're a little more transportable. They're a little easier to maintain as well, so some people just like that aspect of them. And they generally don't take that much damage. Cruisers are a little faster than the battleship, so their main defense isn't that they can sit there and pump all day necessarily, so that they can just run away if they need to. With that, we'll take a look on the inside here. So this ship is designed to come apart really easily. Accessibility is really important when you're working on ships, being able to get to the internal components. So this one's pretty easy. You just there's magnets that hold the deck on. You can see here they're countersunk into the deck rim itself, and then also the deck here. The entire superstructure here is a little bit on the heavy side. I'd like to lighten that up. It's made out of ABS plastic, so it's very durable. It takes a lot of BB dings without really breaking down too much. So from here you can see you can get to a lot of kind of the internal parts that are important. Really, in reality, in this ship, it's designed that you really do have to also take the front part off to really get to anything, or to get to everything you really need to very often. So that slides, there's little locks that lock it down and it slides into place there. We started doing a lot of these little kind of these little latch sort of systems in these ships. It makes it very easy. It slides on. That middle section holds it down so it doesn't slide. Also the back has slides. Generally, I'm going to be accessing the back a little less. Between battles, to get this thing ready, essentially all you've got to do is you got to pull that out. The batteries sit right here. You got to pull these batteries out and change them, switch for fresh batteries. And then this is the CO2 delivery system. It's essentially paintball technology. Got a carbon dioxide bottle, a regulator, 150 psi is the maximum, and then the hose coming from that goes back and ultimately feeds the guns through electronic firing valves or solenoids. In this boat, there's two 5 amp hour nickel metal hydride packs, so 10 amp hours is plenty for what this ship needs to do, and you know that's almost overkill in some regards. Here's a radio box, so everything that can get wet is in the ship. Everything that can't get wet or would be damaged if it got too wet is in the radio box here. I actually have the radio on. Generally going to modify my radios and put push buttons on so the guns fire. Excuse me, with this one, you can hear them clicking here. So in the radio box there's going to be a servo to fire the gun right there. There's going to be a servo to activate the pump. These are just servos connected to mag switches. You can see the pump switch right there. I flip the switch, the pump comes on, the pump sits right here. And then in here also is a drive switch. You can see the servo turns and hits little mag switches in there too to power forward and reverse thrust. One way is forward, other is reverse. And that's pretty much it. That's the electrical systems of the ship. Basically, it's just a drive, a pump, and a gun. For a small ship like this. If you get into the back of this, so again, I'm gonna just push backwards on this. When you lock it in there, and the deck, the other piece of the deck sits here, it really can't go forwards. So it's just easy to pop it backwards. We can get to the underside here. These are the guns. I'll get back to those in a minute. The rudder here too, I guess that's the only other electronic sort of thing in the back. You can see here it's just a servo connected to a gear that turns the rudder. Back here, again, the drive turns the propellers. A little noisy, need to be oiled. And then the rudder turns via that servo there, essentially just connected on this wire all the way to the back to the kind of the radio box there. So yeah, so the air delivery system, this is the tubing here. Goes all the way from the front to the back. These are solenoids. They're electronically activated. They open up a valve that pushes CO2 into the guns or cannons, however you want to call them. And the air comes in here, pushes a piston up in the air. There's a BB that's sitting in the chamber that has rolled down through here and pushes, that piston pushes up to allow only one shot to go through at a time. The BB rolls into here, into the actual kind of breech, and it gets stuck for a split second on an O-ring. When the pressure builds up enough behind it, it fires down the gun. The gun barrels themselves can be 5 inches long. It gives you better velocity, maybe better accuracy. Yeah, if you have longer barrels, so that's what this has got. This boat could have these affixed a little better. They're a little loose in here. something I probably should really clean up. So yeah, so that's kind of the ins and outs of a lot of it. The you know, some of the specific rules that people always ask about. Each gun only gets to be 50 BBs. These are pre-cut to essentially only load 50 at a time. These are common plumbing parts. You can get these at pretty much any hardware store. The BBs load in through the back here, and then just twists the cap back on, seals it up. There's not only gravity pulling the BBs into place, but there's also compressed carbon dioxide coming from the back of the tube there. The pump outlet itself. So this is the pump again. There's a centripetal force pump in here that spins a impeller and it forces water out through the tube here. The inner diameter of the tube can only be 1/8 of an inch for a full unit pump. There's such a thing as a half unit pump that's a little smaller. I guess I didn't mention this yet. These are the motors here that drive. I'm going to just with my hand turn them. You can see there's a dog bone here attached to the shaft that goes to the motor. These motors are basically just compression fit in this boat with a piece of plastic. They're just held down so they can easily be changed if they need to. They generally don't need to be changed all that often. There's the other one underneath there. The rudder itself, there's a lot of rules. Again, the class of the ship is what determines the rudder size, and the as far as total, you know, cross-sectional area here. The propellers here, it's always a balance between finding propellers that are going to accelerate you well enough but also not be too big so that you can still turn and you get enough wash onto the rudder itself. These are 1 1/4 inch propellers, just soldered, really crude, nothing too fancy here. But it gets the job done. In a small lightweight boat like this, propeller performance probably matters a little less than a large battleship. Full weight of this thing when it's battling is around 12 pounds. That is one of the advantages of this boat, and one of the reasons I built it is it is a big boat. It's relatively forgiving for cruisers. Some cruisers kind of get down close to under 10 pounds. That gets to be a lot harder to build. Less room for tolerance. You have to start making sacrifices in the technology you put in your boat. That's just not the case if you have a bigger ship. There is limitations though, as you can see in the hull itself. Ideally, I'd like to have the internal components compressed a little more towards the center, but there's just not room. You have to spread them out along the length of the ship. Cruisers generally don't turn that well compared to battleships. They are faster than battleships, so they can use their speed, like I said, to get away. Other kind of interesting or important components here. So all the stuff that we don't really want to get damaged doesn't get damaged because we have internal armor. So you can see here, this is shower pan liner. It stops most BBs. It should probably be screwed in a little better there. You can see here, these are the ribs that are blocking some of the damage from coming in, but also they provide for structural support, so the shape of the hull is maintained. Right here, this is the balsa wood. It's 1/32 inch balsa wood that holds essentially which is the skin of the hull that takes the damage. You can see even in here, there's a little place there where there was some damage that was patched. This boat currently, here's a hole. That's pretty typical BB damage. Pretty little hole. Enough of those will sink your boat. And then what we do is we just patch up over the top of them with tissue paper and glue. 85% of the entirety of the side of the hull has to be open. So it's you can see how easy you can compress it. It's 1/32 inch balsa wood covered by silk span, which is kind of like a tissue paper like material, and then I just painted right over the top of that. And we do tests that to determine if your material is too hard or too thick or too difficult for the guns to go through, where we take and we drop a piece of brass at it from a designated height, and if it punches a hole in, you're good. If it doesn't, then you have illegal hull skin, you have to redo it. There are some other features that are a good example on this ship. So there's features here that can be impenetrable, where it's not exactly the deck, it's kind of a continuation of a deck. There's actually an armor bulge too in this ship. You can kind of see the shadow of it here, where there's a piece of aluminum that I put into the hull here that runs the whole length of essentially between the guns that was there on the real ship, that gets to be modeled, and it's just another piece that can theoretically stop some BBs. It probably doesn't hold that much of an advantage because it is just an 1/8 inch tall there, so it doesn't stop that many BBs, but it allows you to put those higher grade features into the hull. This ship should have a waterline. It doesn't currently have a waterline, but basically the rules for penetrability for the depth of the hull have to do with where the waterline is, and an inch below that has to be open and able to take damage, whereas anything below that inch line can be firm and made of solid material. The waterline also helps us determine points, so points are scored based on if they hit above the waterline, on the waterline, or below the waterline. And it's harder to get shots below the waterline, so they're worth more points. Other interesting things, water channeling can be pretty important. So essentially you want to restrict where the water can flow on the interior of the hull, not necessarily meaning like bulkheads. The water by rule is supposed to be able to flow freely throughout the ship, but you can add height. So here there's a step here, so basically it's disallowing water from kind of going to the extreme bow of the ship. It makes it go to the middle, which again eventually then should go to the pump and be able to be pumped out rather than sitting in the bow and changing the way that your boat performs on the water. Another aspect of ship design that becomes important for just general battle ability and survivability and reliability is that most internal components should really be attached somehow to the ship, so that if it gets bumped or pushed a little bit, that things don't shift and cause the center of mass to move around. So I've got the radio box here basically velcroed in. This could come off and take it right out if I need to, because at some point you got to work on stuff. On the bottom of that there's little forms for it, so it actually is kind of so it doesn't slide forward or backwards at all. The pump here that I made a little housing out of plastic that it zip ties to, and that kind of keeps things firm from moving around too much in there. The batteries themselves are designed to basically wedge right in there. You can take them out, but they're fairly easily, but they really don't have a lot of give forward, backwards, or side to side. They basically end up jamming against other components in there. You can pop them out pretty easy, but in the normal course of battle they don't really shift. Same thing with the CO2 container. This boat's designed to really be pretty tight. It'll wiggle just a touch in there. Usually I kind of tuck this in to the side, so it really doesn't wiggle that much during the course of battle, but at the same time it's very easy to get it out of there and recharge it, refill it. That's kind of some of the basics. I hope to get a tour of a battleship on the channel too, and you can kind of see at some point what that looks like and kind of compare and contrast there what some of the main differences are. But that's a cruiser. Again, cruisers are really great beginning ships. They're relatively simple to build, relatively simple to maintain. They can be fun. You get to kind of learn the rules of the hobby and make some mistakes, and if you have a bigger one, make some mistakes in a somewhat forgiving way. So that's all. Thanks for watching.